But you don't need a quorum, do you?
Well, they'll be here. We're still.
I'm a little early, huh?
You're on time.
Okay.
Okay, we're streaming. Tom, I'm going to give you back the host. Where are you at here, man? I don't see you.
Santa Fe Public Schools.
Oh, okay.
That way we don't have to change the host to me.
There you go, brother.
I'll rename it.
Do you anticipate the superintendent being present for this meeting? Hello?
Hi, Lorraine. It's Kate. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I just
Kate,
logged.
do you anticipate the superintendent being present for this meeting?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, we just need one more board member to be, to have a quorum. It's you and me, and do you have someone else?
I expect everyone tonight, all 5 of us. So we'll see.
So you and I are just early?
We are. It's 2 minutes before 4, so we're not very early, but we're a little early.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Carmen, it looks like, has come on, so there's 3 of us.
Okay. Okay. Good. Do you want me to mute myself?
Up to you as we get going. Do you?
Okay. We'll see how we're doing. Okay.
Do you want to lead either the pledge or the salute to the New Mexico flag?
No.
Okay.
Board President, are you seeing the Santa Fe Public Schools screen now?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
I want to make sure I'm sharing the right thing.
We don't want to see your email inbox.
Yeah.
I mean, my own makes my head hurt. Yours would definitely make my head hurt.
Yeah.
Carmen, you're on, correct? Can you hear, see, speak? It looks like she's on and not muted. Maybe she stepped away for a moment.
I couldn't get the link. I was freaking out. I couldn't find it.
All right. Well, there's Dr. Garcia.
There I am, by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Is Herman on, Tom?
Yes, he is.
And Robert?
Yes, he is.
Okay, perfect.
I don't know if they were scooting out of town and Mario picked him up and brought him back. So I'm not, I don't know what that means.
Thank goodness somebody did. Okay, we'll give it another moment and I'll check in with Sarah and Rudy.
Today was not a good Zoom day for me, Madam President. I had a heck of a time trying to get into the audit committee. I couldn't do it.
I saw your text and I had a thing happen that prevented me from joining that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or votes.
Dr. Gonzalez, Carmen, you there? Oh, there's Sarah.
I am. I'm
All
here.
right. Excellent. Good to see and hear you both.
So we can go ahead and start the meeting, yes?
We can go ahead and start the meeting. I have texted Rudy, and with any luck, we'll see him in a moment. And oh, nice headshot, Sarah.
Thank you. Sabra's beautiful photography at work.
Did Sabra do that? That's very
Yes.
impressive.
Yes.
My, my.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to get my laptop set up and I'll get video back on.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't have my virtual agenda up today, so Dr. Ryan, I will depend on your screen sharing. The first thing, though, I'm pretty sure we need to do is a roll call. Vice President Price.
Yes?
Secretary Garcia. We hope he'll be joining soon. Board Member Bozay.
Present.
Dr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay, great. And thank you, everyone, staff and public, for being here. We'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance.
So I'm going to confirm.
Sorry, I'm not sure who's that. There we go. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish. Board Member Bozay, Dr. Gonzalez, either of you feel inspired to lead one or both of these, at least in English today?
I'm happy to lead in English.
Okay, go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I can jump in Spanish. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. And the salute.
This is Carmen. I have a question. Is there screen sharing? Because I don't have anything on my screen.
There is screen sharing. Do you have your computer up?
Yeah.
Running? So you might have to, if you clicked away, re-click on the Zoom link or icon to get the screen sharing back.
I'm there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out and get back in.
Okay.
So
We'll continue with the salute and look forward to you rejoining.
I can do the New Mexico flag as well.
Please.
I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico to be a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Okay. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el simbología de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And yes, thank you, Dr. Ryan. We noticed Rudy standing there and doing the pledge and the salute. So if we could let the record show that Secretary Garcia has joined the meeting. Board Member Bozay, do you want to continue with the acknowledgement of tribal land?
Absolutely. We acknowledge the original people of the land, the Tesuque Pueblo people and other tribal nations, and ask them to walk with us today as we share and learn together.
Thank you very much. Now we are on to approval of the agenda. Any changes or anything? And if not, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
This is Sarah. I second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice President Price and a second by Board Member Bozay. We'll do a roll call vote to approve the agenda. Secretary Garcia,
Yes.
Board Member Bozay,
Yes?
Dr. Gonzalez. She may not have rejoined yet. Vice President Price,
Yes.
and the president votes yes. Okay, moving on. I'm just checking to see if Dr. Gonzalez is able to get back in. Okay, we're on to item 2, introduction of the interpreter. Dr. Garcia?
She's on mute.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Dr. James, I'm still muted.
No, you're
No,
not.
you're on.
Oh, okay. Gave me a little sign that said, little note that said you're still muted. Dr. James Lujan will be our interpreter this afternoon. Nuestro intérprete está disponible, Dr. James Lujan. Pueden llamar 701-802-5152. El número para accesar este servicio, ponga 42-77-932. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. And Dr. Gonzalez has rejoined us, it looks like. Glad you're here. Okay, public forum. Do we have any comments that were emailed to our public forum?
Board President Noble, Superintendent Garcia, members of the board, we do not have any public forum comments today.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Moving swiftly along, we have arrived at the main event, the Finance Subcommittee, in which we will be looking at a presentation and talking it through. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We will go through the presentation if it's okay with the board. If we can hold our questions to the end, because I think some of it might be answered by the time we go through it. Unless there's like a definition of terms or some issue that, you need clarification. But as I think we'll just save all the discussion for the end. It might be better if that's okay with the board.
Any objections to that, board members?
No.
No.
I think I heard Dr.
No.
Gonzalez. She's back. All right, thank you. Let's note for the record, Dr. Gonzalez is back with us. Can you see it, Dr. Gonzalez, the screen?
Yes, I can.
Terrific. All righty. Assisting today will be our CFO, Germán Martinez, and Deputy CFO, Robert Martinez, no relation. And we will proceed from there. Let's go to the first slide. This is what we will be discussing today. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can take a look at that. And this is the order of the presentation. Let's go to the next slide. Germán, would you like to talk to this slide, please?
Yes, Madam President, noble members of the board, Dr. Garcia, and communities. This is the development of the budget, which intentionally has multiple components that go into the process. We've started the process with identifying some of the board priorities and outlining the strategic plan. We've looked at the program membership, looked at department and cabinet priorities, also discussed some of the school advisory priorities, as well as identifying the school funding formula for those school or site-based funds. And the only component that is still partially pending is any of this federal or state grants that we are still continuously receiving and will be updating throughout the process.
And go ahead and do the go ahead and do this one as well.
So the main discussion for today will be the operational budget, which is one main component as far as the overall operating budget. So we have a few other grants, federal programs, state and local grants that we receive that are above the operational fund. In addition to that, we receive other capital outlay funds and debt service funds for our total operating budget. So today we'll be focusing on just the operational portion of our budget, which includes the state equalization guarantee and what the district receives through the funding formula from the state. In that funding formula, there is now the inclusion of the instructional materials, and also there is inclusion for the state or for the operational fund, additional funds from leases, rentals, and E-rate. And we also use the cash balance in the operational fund as well.
I want to add to that. The legislature now includes K-5 plus and extended learning in the operational budget. Because we have not received any of those grants for the 2021 school year, obviously they're not in the budget. Those were programs that used to be below the line. Those of you that have been in public education and school finance for a while, those were below the line programming. Now that's also in the operational budget. When we come back to you next week, we'll be talking about, or the next time we talk about budget, the operating budget that will include operational as well as these other funds. We'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So in our approach, we considered the board priorities. We reviewed new revenues and mandatory impacts. What are examples of mandatory impacts? The average 4% increase, moving teachers from level 1 to 2 to 3. The increases in insurance. We did our best to minimize negative impacts to the schools and classrooms. We took a surgical approach, going by line item, contract by contract, instead of just saying we're going to cut a certain percentage, 6.5% across the entire budget. We made a couple of shifts where they were allowable under guidance and law. So if we were able to move a position or an initiative from operational to a grant, we did that. We cut non-recurring expenditures first. So for example, we went to contracts, supplies, right, at the district level, not the school level, before touching jobs. All the FTEs that are recommended for cuts came from the district offices, not from school sites. Any kind of shift at a school site was based on their site-based decision, based on their allocation of funds, based on the number of students. But when it came to the district level to start whittling the budget, we took the cuts from the district level. School principals presented information from their school advisory councils at the budget workshops. Next slide. In a little bit, we're going to review the 910B5, which it will show us the units gained and the units lost. It's really important for the public that's watching this right now and for the board, which I know you understand, that how districts generate units is different district by district, charter by charter. Santa Fe Public Schools is in a declining enrollment. Santa Fe Public Schools lost small size adjustment. Other districts might have been increasing enrollment depending on their community, or they might have generated more units for, let's just say, the training index, right? The cost of training. So every district looks a little bit different. The unit value increased by 3.39%. But how those units fall out, again, is different for every district. We identified funding sources, we projected the deficit, we identified cost-saving measures, focusing on solvency. Obviously, tonight we present a balanced budget as we look at the operational, and a commitment to strong fiscal stewardship. We looked at program sustainability and initiatives, and a framework that supported the strategic plan, and also leaves room for your consideration if you feel the approach is not what it ought to be. This was a real challenge, just like it is doing these meetings, right? It's a little bit easier doing it in person. Trying to do this work via, virtually was really hard. When we get down to the nitty gritty, even though we're using technology, we have paper all over the room and we're writing down and capturing thoughts and putting things in a parking lot. Doing that virtually was really tough. When we look at the time spent at the schools and the people involved, and then at the district level, and then the smaller group that worked on this, we calculated about 600 hours easily has gone thus far into budget development. Go ahead. So I'm going to have Edmond talk about this page, but what I want you to know is that you're going to see, in the first two columns, this is what we generated in units this year, and that's the funding associated with those units. You can see up on top that the unit value this year was $4,758. On the right-hand side, he has included the variance. So in the red, you're seeing where we generated less units and less money. In the green, you can see where we generated more units and more money from the year before. The total increase that we saw in new dollars, in new revenue, is $2.5 million, or if you round that up, 2.6 million. These are the new dollars generated in the operational budget. The operational budget is what funds the salaries, right? And everything associated with the schools, running the schools. It does not include capital. It does not include federal funds. It does not include grants. This is primarily funded from the state equalization guarantee. And the new dollars there are only 2.6 million. Edmond, you want to go through those line items and explain them, please?
Yes, definitely. So the units that are generated are not necessarily the membership specifically that listed for each of those programs. The units are a weighted factor. So the membership will be multiplied by a factor which will calculate a specific unit. For the basic program, it does identify the specific membership that is included both in the regular membership, as well as any of those students that are also considered included in the regular membership, which are students in the what are considered 3Y and 4Y program, which are special ed students that are also included in that membership. In the other membership that is included in the basic program units are all of the special ed membership from the C level, or what was considered the C level and the D level for those students. And then each of the other sections as far as the membership is based off of the actual number of students that are a part of that program. So we may have more students that are being served in some of these programs, but we're only able to calculate or include those that are allowed by the state in terms of the inclusion for each of those programs. For example, we may provide services for additional students in the fine arts that may not be included. They're only included for elementary students and not for any of the other grade levels. And so also with bilingual, there's only inclusion of 1 hour, 2 hour, or 3 hour as far as how those students are being served. So it may not include all of the membership, and then those are multiplied by a specific factor, and that's how the units are generated. So we do generate approximately 23,000 units in total. That's inclusive of the membership times the unit factor itself.
All right, were you finished, Edmund?
Yeah.
So what we looked at were what are the impacts to this budget? And so we know that the raises, the average 4%, and the licensure level changes, right? We have to pay for teachers moving from level 1 to level 2 or level 2 to level 3. That new cost is $3.9 million. And then there are increases in the benefit side that the employer has to pay. That's $1.4 million. If the board should decide, and we just set it aside just in case, through negotiations, that the board wants to continue with the mandatory, not the increases for the employee, that they would have to pay an insurance, that was $60,000. And then we're at a point with E-rate now where we saw $1 million less, which was previously in the base. So our deficit was $6.36 million. This does not include what we're supposed to be generating for instructional materials. We haven't heard yet from that, and we do have to account for that if we don't get additional revenue. So right now, the deficit based on these costs is $6.36 million. So let's go to the next slide. So Edmond alluded to that a while ago in terms of, while we generate fine arts funding, let's say, for example, we provide services far beyond what we generate in terms of units for the fine arts, okay, is an example of that. We also are feeling the cumulative effect of the second year of small size adjustment loss, 487 million this year. We will see that cumulative effect adding on an additional $487 million for 3 more years. Again, I already talked about the fact that we're not
Just
funded
to
for them.
jump in, Dr. Garcia, because you said it a couple times, it's 487,000, even though it feels like 487 million.
I said $1 million. Sorry. Thank you for correcting
Right.
that. I'm a bit tired. Thank you. Please, anybody jump in if I say something weird. The district is not funded. Again, we already talked about that. Also, the PTR, we have one of the lowest pupil teacher ratios in the state. And also our ratio of assistant principals per students is somewhat lower in our district, right? And these are just sort of norms that the district has developed over the years, because that's been important to the previous boards. Let's go to the next slide. So if you recall what we just talked about, what were the impacts or new deficits, right? These amounts are in millions, okay? So the salaries plus the increases, level increases, $3.9 million. The mandatory benefits, $1.4 million. Board benefits that the board has picked up in the past, 60,000. Decrease in E-rate, $1 million, for a deficit of 6.36 million. What we did was to identify sources of revenue to mitigate that deficit. And the only place it can come from is the state equalization guarantee, and then any additional cuts that we could make to balance the budget. So obviously we received 2.6 million, right, from the state equalization guarantee. There was a decline in special education enrollment, and we worked with Ms. Lucero. And because we're going to have fewer students requiring certain kinds of services, we were able to cut 200,000. Fine arts generated, if you remember from that earlier sheet, about 44,000 less. We cut 44,000. We cut 40,000. If you notice that asterisk, it's over here on the right-hand side. We're recommending taking that and putting it in non-recurring. We cut 8 FTE from the district. That was not easy because all of those people do a valuable service and are needed, but we have to make this budget balance. And we have committed, and I have committed for a long time, that before we cut at the school level, we need to cut at the district level first. And so people will take on additional duties, or we will not do some of the things that we were doing before. We went line item by line item by line item on contracts and identified $1.87 million. Many of those services were, some of those services were one-time services that we did not need. Maybe we used a photographer for an event. Maybe we had a certain interpreter for an event. We needed printing. We had radio ads of whatever, we tried to identify what those were. Some of those do provide services, professional development, facilitation services, etc. So that was the 1.87 million. The professional development, we cut the 600,000 that was in the budget. You notice there's an asterisk for recommending replacing it with 400,000 from non-recurring. There was 100,000 in math and science initiatives that had been carried over from the last 2 years. We had to cut that. We had $50,000 for recruit and retain, meaning teachers. We left 25,000 for the National Board Certified Teachers. That has been very popular, and it also is a great retention tool, and it generates money for the district. District supplies, not school-based supplies, 145,000. That was also put back in non-recurring. So we were able to identify costs, if this is where the board agrees to, as a strategy to balance that deficit of $6.36 million. So on the right-hand side, we anticipate that the state, that the city will provide, and I think it's 187 or 185,000, but because we've been rounding, we rounded that up to 190,000 from the crossing guards. That is their portion of the cost. It's our hope that that is seen as a priority and will be included in the budget. So we put it over here on this side. You can see the 40,000 for fine arts, instructional materials and textbooks. There's been talk that that might be cut at the state. We have not received the allocation. We do need to be concerned about that early, because if this budget is approved, we want to make sure that we can order. So we put in 600,000 for instructional materials and textbooks in non-recurring. We put in 400,000 for professional development, the district supplies, and then the GEO bond. This will be another mail-in election. Between the election costs and the voter education and the mailers and the radio ads, and really communicating with the public about what this election is about, because it reaches every household in Santa Fe. The ballots will, it's not like previous elections where 6% show up. It requires, that was the expenditure for ETN. So we put in 350,000 in non-recurring for the GEO bond election costs. So again, like we did on the other side, we looked at a non-recurring sources of revenue. We have 750,000 for land sales. we are requesting to take $975,000 from the cash balance, and the total combined is $1,725,000. We estimate a cash balance of $5.3 million. Again, we have to take a really good look at this again. We're going to be working with our auditor also to have her take another look. We can allocate $975,000 from cash balance along with the land sales to cover these non-recurring expenditures. That will bring the projected remaining cash balance to $4.3 million, and the percentage would be 3.7%. The board has had a policy of keeping the cash balance between 5 and 7%. The state requirement is 3%. So this is 0.7% above the state requirement. Given where we are, along with other districts and the cash balances and reserves across the state, I know there's concern about bond ratings, but we would imagine that the bond raters would be looking at this across in a context, right? How we compare with county, city government, with other entities our size across the state, and also what the state coffers look like. Let's go to the next slide. So here's some impacts from the legislative session that we don't know. The CARES Act really, I don't think it's dependent from the special legislative session, but it could be, I don't know. We have not yet heard specifically how much Santa Fe Public Schools will be receiving. We understand there is a pot of money from the CARES Act to go to schools to help cover COVID expenditures. There is a need for specialized training, so that could help offset some of those costs. There was a court ruling that the state could no longer take the credit on federal impact aid. Santa Fe Public Schools would see an increase of recurring revenue, but we don't know yet if the legislature will take action during the special session or wait until the January session in 2021. Or we've heard there could be additional cuts to the base budget, in which case we would need to come back to the board, and we would have to make additional cuts. We hope that any cuts made to the budget would be done in terms of below the line, what used to be below the line funding versus open the doors costs, which is the basic operation of the district. There's also been discussion about tapping into the land grant permanent fund, but that would require a constitutional amendment, and the ballot initiative would have to go to the voters. Depending if that was done in the special session, it could conceivably go to voters in November. If it was done, if it is done at all, in January, it would not go to the voters until November of 2021. Next slide. So there was a state freeze on state-funded capital outlay projects. And Robert, would you speak to these next slides?
Sure thing. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, we are getting a freeze on our capital projects in the amount of $758,000 spanning from the fiscal year 19-20 and the fiscal year 2020 reauthorizations. We also had one that was funded in the 2021 legislative session, which we will see that in a future slide. Out of about 30 legislative appropriations that were in activity, only 8 remained incomplete, of which 1 belongs to NDI. Of that 758,000, only about 254,000 belongs to the Santa Fe Public School District. As I just mentioned earlier, the project funded in the 2020 legislative session will also not be funded. You can go to the next slide, Hedman. Thank you. So this is a listing of the frozen projects from the Capital Outlay Bureau in the 2020 legislative session. So as you could see in the third column, the obligated amount, there are some projects that did have an obligated amount, they just never reached completion. So you could see NDI is 503,765, which brought up the project balance for that. Any question, or I guess we're holding that till the end. Next slide, please. And this is a list of the frozen projects from the 2020 legislative session. As you can see, the Santa Fe PSD security system upgrade, we were given $280,000. This was the only one that was funded. The others were line item vetoed, but this one will also be frozen.
So what we are proposing to the board well, obviously today is May 14th, and we're reviewing the initial operational budget. On May 26th, we're asking to have a finance subcommittee meeting, move it up from the 28th to look at this again and look at the entire operating budget. If the board is comfortable at that time and does not foresee any changes, you could approve the budget on the 26th. If you sent us back to the drawing board and wanted to look at it again, then we would have a special board meeting on the 28th. What I would recommend is that we would advertise both for that week. And if we approve the budget on the 26th, we can cancel the 28th. We have to submit the operating budget to the Public Education Department on the 3rd of June. And at this point, Madam President and members of the board, we're ready to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation and for taking us through that. Questions from the board? Comments?
This is Carmen.
Please go ahead.
Madam President, Dr. Garcia, members of the board, I was just curious, what kind of capital outlay is there for NDI? Do they have a space that they're fixing up? What is it?
Madam President, members of the board, I'm going to defer that to Robert Martinez. I'm not sure what we're just the fiscal agent for it to receive the money, but I don't know what it is. Do you know, Mr. Martinez?
Absolutely.
So, Madam President, on that note, this is Rudy.
Hang on, let's let Dr. Gonzalez's question get answered, please. Go ahead, Mr. Martinez.
Madam President, members of the board, for NDI, what they were doing was they were doing an addition to the Dance Barns facility. And as Dr. Garcia mentioned, that we were carrying that for NDI, but it was an addition on their Dance Barns.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Secretary Garcia.
And Mr. Martinez, why are we the fiscal agent for that, for the school? And so does that mean we actually utilize our project managers, or how does that work? If you can explain that to me. Sorry.
Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, we do not utilize our own project managers for that, although we work with facilities and maintenance to make sure that they are following the guidelines that we have and the reporting and everything, and making sure that they sign off on the invoices before they go to accounts payable to make sure the work has been.
NDI provides, considerable service to the district, and we also, pay for services also. But in our desire to be a good partner, they needed a public school entity to be the fiscal agent, and they approached us during the session and previous sessions, and so we agreed to help them by accepting the money. But we are not responsible for ensuring that that money is spent, or that it's, that the project is completed. We're just truly just like a pass-through.
Right, and if I may add, any reimbursement requests or anything go directly from the district to the Public Education Department. There's no pass-through from NDI. We carry the procurement. They have to abide by our guidelines and everything in-house.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll get with the superintendent and with Mr. Martin. I think NDI does a great job. Don't get me wrong. They do an excellent job for the community. I'm just interested as into how we can actually funnel money to a nonprofit through Santa Fe Public Schools, but you can get with me a little bit later on that, Mr. Martinez. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, that was actually advised to us by Legislative Council Service. We did not seek that out. The legislature approached us to do that, to help them.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments, thoughts?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Secretary Garcia.
First of all, thank you to the superintendent and your team for actually looking at the budget in detail. And once again, lucky to be on the Santa Fe Public School Board, because we do have a excellent community out there that actually allowed us to pass that general obligation bond, et cetera, so on and so forth. And thank you for balancing and bringing forward a proposed balanced budget. One of the questions I have is the general obligation bond that you have set aside for $350,000. That's actually set aside money for the next election. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam President, Mr. Secretary, yes. That was very close to what we expended for the ETN election. It will be another mail-in election, and in order for us to stay on cycle. And it requires, it's just a lot more expensive than the elections when they come in person.
So, Madam President, Superintendent, we're assuming that the board is actually going to approve to go through a special election instead of doing it in November. Is that what we're assuming?
Madam President, members of the board, the budget's a plan, so we're just planning in advance. If you don't, that money would just stay in cash balance.
Thank you. And then also in regards to the, Madam President, in regards to the 0.75 additional cash reserves that we're required to carry from the Public Education Department, I guess I'm just concerned if the state legislature goes and sweeps all of our cash reserves like they did 2-3 years ago. So I guess those are just.
And Madam President, on that point, if I may.
Please.
Secretary Garcia, if you look at that slide, and I know it's kind of hard to toggle back and forth, but because of these non-recurring expenses that I think are very legitimate, like the professional development, the instructional materials and whatnot, if we find additional revenue, obviously that would go in the cash balance. But having the cash balance at 3.7 million and at, is it 3.7% or 3.5%?
3.7.
3.7%. It's only 0.7% of above what the PED recommends. I think if we have a much higher cash balance, it could become a larger target. These are legitimate expenditures that make sense because they are non-recurring.
That's fine. Thank you, Madam President, Superintendent. Maybe another question or two in regards to the page that shows the raises for the educators.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to do the 3.9 or we're not, or the state's going to cover that, or how can you explain that?
The way, okay, what it will cost us to do the raises is 3.9 million. Go to the next slide.
So
actually it's more than that. It's 3.9 million plus, go back, Irman, go back. It's 3.9 million plus 1.4 million with the benefits. 9 and 4 is 13. It's actually 5.3 million. Go forward now. It's 5.3 million to cover the raises and the benefits. Go forward again, Mr. Martinez. And again. Go forward. Okay. So the way we're paying for it, Mr. Garcia or Secretary Garcia, is from the SEG, the 2.6. And then these cuts that we're making help us pay for those raises.
So I just want to make it for the record so that way the union and all the educators out there know that us as the board, definitely superintendent and their team, are actually trying to figure this out. So that way we can assist our educators and everybody that is getting that raise, that we're actually working with them. And so I think that should be on the record. Let's see, one last question is so in regards to the SEG, we're actually getting an additional $2.6 million, it looks like.
Yes, sir.
Just kind of in a nutshell, if we're actually, so does that mean we're getting more kids because we're getting a higher amount of money this year?
No, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, Madam President, Herman, can you go back to the unit, the 910B form? 910B3 rather, or B5, I forget what it is, B52, what is that form? Next slide. Herman, there you go. Mr. Secretary, if you look at this page right here, here are all the units. There's the basic unit value. And then you can see what we generated and where we lost units. And then the net was 2.5 million, 83,723. I rounded it up to 2.6. That's the new money we generated. And so in some places we grew and in some places we lost. We had less kids overall, less in special ed, we generated less units in fine arts, less in bilingual, the less in small size adjustment, etc.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Superintendent and your team for doing a great job.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Secretary.
And this is just to pick up on that point, something that perhaps bears repeating, what Dr. Garcia says again and again, which is how the units shake out is a really important piece of what we end up getting funded for, depending on the actual membership. And we're always on the previous year. So how the units shake out is the reality of our 1920 school year, which is what will be funded for in 2021.
That is correct, Madam President. And on that point, what could change that is if we saw more than 1% growth. Any growth less than 1%, you won't see it till the following year because we're on prior year funding. But if by some miracle we saw more than 1% growth, we would realize additional revenue. As well as I said earlier, federal impact aid, CARES Act dollars. If by some weird reason the legislature decided to do something differently for us in the special session, we could realize additional revenue.
And a big piece of it is the increase in the at-risk funding, which is the state's answer in some fashion to the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, because that is, of course, the crux of the issue in that, and that is where a significant amount of new or increased revenue is coming from in our revenue picture. And this same board will be preparing next year's budget. I mean, the task before us obviously is this year's budget, but just to look ahead and to understand even how the units shake out and that membership, we hope that things will settle down in the 2021 school year. But there are a number of factors in play, which we can all just guess at right now, which is if people are unemployed and their children come back to public schools from privates because they can't afford tuition. There's a lot of people who are somewhat afraid of sending their children to any group environment. So, there could be a balance of increase and then decrease because just anecdotally, I'm seeing a lot of chatter about people considering homeschool because they are worried about sending their children into a school environment. So we shall see.
Madam President, on that point, I have had staff working on, we are re-envisioning what the academy can be and expanding the grades. And so we'll have a plan that we'll be bringing to you. But I have asked the staff to be thinking of an elementary corollary to that. Also looking at hybrid programs to offer parents more choice, because I do think that there will be parents who will be fearful to send their children to school, given the unpredictability of the pandemic and the issues with Kawasaki syndrome and all of that that's coming out. And so I totally get it. And I think we are already planning for various options in terms of doing everything we can to make sure our kids are safe when they come back to school.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Really appreciate that. We are very fortunate to have you because I know you are doing a lot of different scenario planning at the moment.
And a great team. Thank you.
Absolutely. A great team. Other questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair, no.
Sorry, Board Member Bose, were you speaking up there? You seem frozen in your video and your audio is a little.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That sounded a little better. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Madam President, Dr. members of the board, just want to say again.
I'm sorry, Board Member Bose, you sound like you're suffocating underwater.
May help if she turns off her video, if her internet is slow, and just do the audio.
Okay, I will try just doing.
That sounds better. Start again.
Is that clear now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Board President Noble, Dr. Garcia, members of the board, I would like to say thank you for this wonderful presentation. I can't imagine how much work has gone into it. And I know that we're in very difficult times, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the effort that has gone into keeping the cuts away from the classroom. Any and all cuts are painful, I'm sure, but I appreciate that our children and teachers and staff are prioritized so that we can make sure that everyone has the best experience possible, and also to hear that you're considering all of the different scenarios for the fall, because that's definitely been weighing on my mind as well. So I'm glad to hear that's underway. We're very lucky to have you and the wonderful team that works here.
Thank you, Madam President, Board Member Bose. Madam President.
Yes, that was quite surreal. I think it slows down somehow because Sarah clearly was not speaking at the cadence that we heard it, but I think we all got it. Yes, Dr. Garcia, go on.
Madam President, I'd just like to know from the board if you feel that our approach, that you're in agreement with our approach, if there is some concern that you may have that you want us to look at, so that we can continue to move forward, and also with the timelines that we're recommending for moving forward.
Yes, thank you. I had one question and was going to ask that question in a similar way. My one question is, do we need to amend the board policy in order to basically have our reserves be at 3.7%, or did we do that 2 years ago, and is that still relevant?
Madam President, members of the board, when you approve the budget, you can make a motion to suspend the policy for this one budget and not really remove your policy. Okay. And you did that last year in last year's budget, if you recall, or the one before. I think it was last year's, no, the one before.
It was the one before.
You decided, where you decided you were going to do 500,000 of non-recurring.
Yeah.
And actually, then there were recurring expenditures, and but we segregated it in the budget, and then you just suspended the board policy for that one time in the motion to approve the budget. I would recommend you do it that way so that your policy holds and you don't have to go back and fix it again.
Yeah, great. We'll take your advice on that as and when we get there. Was there another member? Yes, Dr. Gonzalez, go ahead.
Yes, I want to echo Sarah's comments. I'm really pleased with the work that you all have done. Dr. Garcia and team. I think it's been really carefully considered, and I appreciate that. And it was, to me, very well laid out for us to understand exactly what you did, and I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to the question Dr. Garcia was raising, which I wanted to also be explicit about, there are a few approaches and strategies that she called out very specifically in the presentation. And I just want to ask if there are any questions or objections to those from the board. And by way of comment, say, I agree with all of the strategies, that include that the board holds employees harmless on the premium increases, which is that $60,000 cost, and the few other things that Dr. Garcia pointed out as we went through the presentation. And, again, I think as Board Member Bose and Board Member Gonzalez have said, we're extremely fortunate to have this team and this hard work. It looks simple and clear at this stage, and that is only the product of a great deal of hard work and clear thinking. So we appreciate that. And I just want to say that I do agree with the strategies that were called out in the presentation, and just want to ask very explicitly if other board members have additional questions about that. Of course, when we vote, we always have the option to ask more questions and disagree if we need to, but at this stage, do other board members have questions or want to in any way sort of talk about the strategies that were embedded in the presentation and the assumptions upon building the budget? Sarah is shaking her head. No issues. Carmen
No
is
issues.
also.
I'm in agreement.
Okay, great. Okay, does that sort of answer your question, Dr. Garcia? You're muted. Can see your lips moving.
I keep muting because I know the more of us that are unmuted, it creates more echo and affects the quality. But so is it all right with the board then if the next finance meetings, we move the study session to whatever date I said, the 26th, we put a special for the 28th if we don't need it, and we act on the budget on the 26th, we will be done. We will bring the entire operating budget. The operational will stay as it is unless there's some unforeseen something that happens. We discover an error. We find that our cash balance isn't what we thought it was going to be. As you know, this is a process. But I just want to remind everybody that the budget is a plan, right? And every time we bring you a budget adjustment request, it's because we're adjusting the budget. We get new money in. We have to do a bar. We have to move money to a line item. That's another budget adjustment request. So if everything goes perfectly between now and June 3rd, the next big time that we will come back and look at budget as a whole is what the legislature does. If we find out how much we're getting for the federal impact aid credit, okay, if we get more COVID money, then we have some choice points of where we want to add back money. So the whole process is fluid. And for the new board members, as you go through this cycle, it becomes more understandable. I know this is a very school budget finance, school finance is just a little odd in terms of how New Mexico funds its schools. But as you do it more, it becomes more understandable.
But if you thought you had it down, then how about this year? We'll throw the planning for the 2021 budget at you. And I think Dr. Garcia said this to all board members in our board review and looking at this budget ahead of time. But we may need to come back in July if there are significant movements in the special session in June to make adjustments. And I think it's responsible for us to think about that. And the good news is we probably aren't traveling much during July, and it may be an easier thing to do this year. One other thing, Dr. Garcia, I wanted to bring up, I don't know, I heard from someone fairly high level in the state today about basically registering with FEMA. Apparently, local entities may be able to claim money for from FEMA that would be reimbursable for COVID activities. So I don't know if we've done that, but it sounds like it's something that might be worth investigating.
We will look into it.
Okay, nodding.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we heard you and you nodded vigorously. It works. Any objections from board members to what was proposed in terms of moving the study session on May 28th, which would be a Thursday, to Tuesday, May 26th, and having a board meeting on the budget that week? Looks like no objection, so thank you very much. Okay, I guess we can move on. I think the next thing on our agenda is going to be advanced planning. And it looks like we need to have the special meeting for the bond sale on May 19th. And I assume, Dr. Garcia, are we still wanting a regular meeting on that day, given that we'll have one the following week? You're muted.
Madam President, it looks, we reviewed this and we do have an executive session. So what I think we will do, I don't know. I think this is backwards. I've got to go talk to Alma, but I think that what we want to do is have the special meeting. That'll take about 15 minutes, and then adjourn that meeting, and then call the next meeting to order, go into exec, and then have the regular meeting. It does need to be done on that date, so we just need to backward plan the timeout. I think that we will need the full hour for executive. So I would recommend that we probably have the special meeting at 5, not 4, not at 4, not 5 o'clock.
Okay. So we will look out for notices on that, and we can discuss it. And obviously then we will publicly notice the timing as to what we're doing, but sounds like it might be a special meeting at 4 p.m., an executive session or at 4:30, and a regular meeting beginning at 5:30.
Correct. And then, Madam President, for the meeting on the 28th, we actually would have the study session on the 26th, and then a special board meeting on the 28th, if we needed it.
Got it. Okay.
Dr. Garcia.
Yes.
Board President Noble and Board Member Superintendent Dr. Garcia, just as a clarification, the special board meeting was when we went back and had that conversation with Art Melendres, was not needed as a special session. It can be included in the regular meeting.
Oh, terrific. So then we don't even need the special meeting for sale of bonds. All right, then we just have a regular meeting at 4:30 for exec.
Right. So that would be the plan would be much more in line with what we regularly do. Executive session at 4:30, regular meeting at 5:30, which would include the bond sale.
And that's why she put combined with regular meeting. I get it.
Okay, and we will, for some reason, my memory is telling me that I thought Art had said that we needed a special meeting, but if not the case, if that's not the case, that's great. So we'll just double check that and be sure we notice the plan.
We will double check that.
Okay, anything else on advanced planning? We'll all be paying attention to exactly how it goes for the next couple weeks because there will be some changes. Anything else? All graduation dates to be determined. We will be sending our love as ever to the class of 2020 with the difficult times and frankly unfair circumstances that they are graduating under.
Madam President, members of the board, look to the skies at 8:20 on Friday. You'll see the lights on at Capitol, stadium lights at Capitol and Santa Fe High in honor of all of our graduates. And we have ordered yard signs for every single graduate that says congratulations to the class of 2020. And so I don't know if Mr. Chavez is still on, but those should be arriving soon. Mr. Chavez, are you on? But anyway, when you see a house, if you're out walking about, you know, and you see a senior or someone who looks like a senior, give them a shout out. You know, we want to do all we can to recognize them. It's been a really tough year.
I also, just as a point of privilege, want to say thank you to NEA President Grace Mayer, who has joined the meeting, and Dr. Ryan, thank you for sharing the comment from her to all of us. So just to recognize that we've seen that, and appreciate everybody being here. This is an incredible cast as I scroll through all of the tiles of who's here tonight. Really appreciate everybody being here and all that you do for the students and families in the Santa Fe Public Schools. All right, anything else? With that, we are adjourned and we'll be back together on Tuesday, May 19th. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Be well, everyone.